Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa will later this morning launch South Africa's Group of 20 or G20 Presidency in Cape Town. Addressing the National Council of Provinces in Parliament recently, Ramaphosa said the country's G20 presidency will bring the development priorities of the African continent and the Global South more firmly onto the agenda of the G20. The Group of 20 is a forum of the largest economies in the world who meet regularly to discuss the most pressing issues facing the global economy. To talk more on this, we are joined in studio by Sophie Mokoena, who is SABC News International Editor. Sophie, always a pleasure chatting to you. Thanks for coming in early this morning to talk about a couple pressing issues. And I suppose one of the biggest ones, and one of our mind, is the taking over of the G20 presidency. And South Africa, President Ramaphosa is launching the country's G20 presidency at a media briefing later this morning. What are we expecting him to say?
I think he's going to outline the theme of South Africa being the leader of this group. And I think as there was an announcement earlier on, the theme will revolve around solidarity, equality, and sustainable development, because this group is very important in the global affairs. As it was launched in 1999 in the financial crisis in Asia. And later it was elevated to heads of state and government when it started with finance ministers and central bank governors. And when it was elevated, then the group was able to discuss many things, not only issues that are related to the global economy or financial system, but also political climate at a particular time, because you'll find that political climate has an impact to the financial system, including issues that are related to the economy. So I think he is going to outline that and also explain South Africa's quest to ensure that the agenda is still geared towards elevating the needs and aspirations of the developing South, including the African continent, and also to address issues such as poverty and unemployment.
I mean, it's a huge milestone that the African Union became the G20 full member for the list for the first time this year. I mean, it's huge, basically representing all nations on the continent and offering new perspectives. So I suppose it's important for us to look at the role that South Africa takes on now with this rotational G20 presidency, but also a greater showing now for the African continent and a bigger voice.
Well, when you look at South government in the G20, the country is actually punching above its weight when you look at our GDP. These are rich, industrialized nations. And South Africa has always believed that when you bring in the entire continent, you have a better muscle and a better energy in terms of negotiating with these big countries. And therefore, South Africa has been pushing for the AU to be part of the G20. In the same way, you have the European Union on the table because you have the EU member countries. And therefore, South Africa was the only country within the group, is still the only country in the group, and therefore South Africa felt that in the AU, you're bringing more power to negotiate and to bargain. And therefore, now Africa is on the table, and all the time, the chair of the assembly of the AU and the commissioner of the AU will attend these meetings. And you know that chair of the assembly always rotate. And therefore, it will depend at the particular time who's the chair of the AU. And therefore, I think this will be better because then you are able to interest of Africa.
Yeah, I mean, as you rightly mentioned, you know, the nations of G20 have massive GDPs. I mean, they account for more than 85% of the global economic output. Emerging markets, and this, I think, is now going to be a big theme of what we see coming in here. Let's talk about the influencing of policies and the presence thereof with South Africa at the helm.
You know that the emerging markets or the developing South are saying that there should be equality in terms of how you treat this country, particularly at the multilateral level, when you look at financial institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank, and a demand to transform those institutions, and by extension, transform the whole financial system. There's a support, there's a buying in from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. And I think this will be the main issue in terms of the developing South, to ensure that these financial institutions respond to the current challenges, because when they were established after the Second World War, many countries were not part of the United Nations, and the UN has changed. And therefore, you want equality. You want countries to be treated equally, even though you know that some have better muscle in terms of the economy, the size of the economy. But the issue of equality is quite important when you want to address challenges facing the world, particularly economic challenges.
So obviously today is a big day. The president will launch the G20 presidency in Cape Town. It'll be quite interesting to see if we see him including any of the geopolitical tensions, perhaps in Russia and Ukraine. Maybe that'll come up. Perhaps we'll even hear him speak about some of the comments that President-elect asked over the weekend about this BRICS currency, one we're not too sure that there is even one. I'm not sure that's been spoken about at any level at the moment. And also that 100% tariff threat against BRICS nations. Talk to us about some of these things, but perhaps he'll raise them.
Solidarity with those who are oppressed, solidarity with those who are marginalized, equality, equal treatment of countries. And for you to achieve a better world as G20, you must ensure that there's peace and security in the world. And therefore, you have to find a way to talk about how these conflicts have affected the economic growth, the global economy in general, and the supply chain. We know it did happen with the war in Ukraine. The second issue, on the issue of America, you know that South Africa will be handing over the leadership of the G20 to America. America, the incoming president of the G20, and therefore you will have to engage with the Americans constantly. And therefore, the president to engage with the US President Donald Trump. Now, the threat in relation to the tariffs, I think President Trump was not properly briefed in terms of what BRICS is saying. BRICS never adopted any resolution to launch a currency, but they agreed as member countries that because of the current challenges where some of member countries are facing sanctions from the European Union countries and also from the United States of America, like Russia, you have to ensure that you do business, you trade with your own national currencies to avoid a situation where you have to use SWIFT to clear those payments, and SWIFT will refuse to clear the payments of Russia. And it has been happening already. India has been exporting oil and gas from Russia, and they've been using the national currencies. The same with the pipeline from Russia to China. The agreement is that they will trade using their local currencies, and that project was funded with national currencies. And therefore, I think Donald Trump is missing a point. But I remember speaking to the former president of South Africa, Kgalema Motlanthe, saying that nobody thought the empire will fall. It did. And therefore, the dominance of the US will be reduced, whether America like it or not. Therefore, the dominance of the dollar will be reduced at some point in time. And I think America must wake up and smell the coffee and accept that it's not business as usual.
Yeah, interesting time we're heading into. It certainly is. But Sophie, there's too much to speak about. I mean, we've got Biden's visit to Angola, which is a very interesting one as well. But we've also got elections still taking place on the continent. Ghana, they're going to the polls. Can you very quickly tell us what we should be looking out? I mean, perhaps the main election candidates. What's at stake in the West African democratic country there?
I think the former president of that country who is contesting is a person to watch. And I think looking at what people are saying and the frustrations due to the economic challenges in Ghana, we saw lots and lots of protests since last year. Young people are unemployed and the economy is not doing well. And therefore, it will be interesting to see how is he going to perform. And lastly, I think in the same breath, when you look at the West Africa, it will be interesting who will be the president of Ghana, because we have lots of challenges in West Africa. And that brings us to the visit of the president of Nigeria today in South Africa, where they will co-chair the South Africa-Nigeria Binational Commission, where these issues also will be discussed, the global economy, security, trade between the two countries. And therefore, I think there's a lot happening at this point in time when others are preparing to go on holidays. It looks like for us it's quite busy, and with Trump yesterday saying that if you don't release the hostages before 20th of January when to office, there's going to be hell. And you have Biden, on the other hand, pardoning his son and therefore causing a lot of concerns from people. And he is currently in Angola. The question is, you are a lame duck, you are left with a few weeks. What are you doing in Angola?
Yeah, indeed. Wow. All right. Sophie, I've got to let you go, but I can't let you go without Namibia. Very quickly, if you can, update us. Talk to us about it.
I think we are heading towards having a woman president in Namibia. She's leading right now. SWAPO is leading. It will depend in terms of the margin, but I think, as I pointed out earlier on, whichever way, there's going to be history in Namibia, and I think this is what we are looking at right now.
President, perhaps, Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah. That's the first female president we could see coming into Namibia, if that does in fact happen. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sophie, coming in and talking to us about some of the major issues that are taking place on the continent, abroad, and it really is a very, very busy calendar internationally.